In this video, we're going to be showing how you can use a table variable inside of a user-defined function, but instead of just making a shell of a user-defined function and having a simple table that we populate, a table variable that we populate from another table, and then selecting something like the count from it, which is kind of useless, I wanted to show you a real-world example of something that you can do. But before we look at it, we'll just say this. One of the differences between a user-defined function and a stored procedure is this. A user-defined function can only return a single value. It can't return a record set. It can't return one record with multiple fields. The only thing that it can really do is return one value, whether it's numeric, text, what have you. That being said, if you want to return something where there's sort of like an array, you can cheat and you can have like a list of items that are comma separated or comma delimited, or you can delimit with the semicolon or the pipe, whatever is your character of choice. But a real world example, and the one that I'm going to show you, is you may already know how to select the table names from syscolumns. You have to do a join with sysobjects, and anyway, what that'll do is that will give you the field names of a table in order. The way that they get returned from SQL Server from syscolumns, it's something called call ID. Those are ordered automatically, even if you do not use an order by or anything like that in your query. They come out in the order that you want, so it's kind of like a freebie. But here's the thing. What'll happen is if there's 7 fields, you will get 7 records with 1 field each, and the name of the field will be name. That's the name of it in syscolumns. If that's what you defaulted to. But the thing is, you will have basically 7 records, and you can only return one value, like just one thing. So what you'd have to do is consolidate them. But how do you do that? You're taking something two-dimensional and trying to crush it into one-dimensional. Well, here's an example. We'll go to our Acme database, programmability. Now, functions. See all these different options? Ooh, scalar valued functions. Get field list. Let's take a look at this. This is a real function that I use in real software, and like in a real program. Basically, all you're doing is passing in a table name, and the way that this is set up, it assumes that you're looking for tables in the same database where this function exists. If not, you could add another parameter for the database. It gets a little tricky because it would be a little trickier to pass it in, because if you think of the hierarchy, every user database does have a sysobjects table and a syscolumns. So it might just be easier if you have this working the way you want. Just plunk it in each database where you think you might need it. In any event, we're going to return a varchar of 2000. That's more than enough unless you have a really big table. What we're going to do is there's a temp table or a table variable called calls, for columns, and it basically has a row num. All this is a field counter. The first record is going to be 1, and then 2, and then 3, and the other field is FLD for field. It's the column name basically. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to insert into this thing called calls, into the one field called field FLD. The row num is automatic. I don't have to do anything with that. But the record set that I'm generating for this, in other words, to fill this column, here's what I'm calling. I'm selecting scname. SC stands for syscolumns.name. That's the name that I'm giving it right here. I'm naming the table, so I don't have to write syscolumns every time. It's a lot cleaner. Not that there's a lot of code right here. But I'm doing a join on the syscolumns and sysobjects on basically the ID field in both of them. The ID field in sysobjects is unique, but in syscolumns it isn't. To make a unique field and a unique record in syscolumns, you need an ID and a call ID, but we don't even have to worry about that because the ID here to here is one to many, but it's clean. It just gets you all the records you want, one of each of them. And then where I'm saying where the SO, the name in the sysobject table, is table, which is the name of the table that we're passing in up here. So it's real simple. I mean, some of the people watching this, you've probably done this a million times, okay? Maybe not in a function. But anyway, so we're basically going to return all that. So we're going to have basically a table variable that's going to look something like this. Let's open up another query window. Actually, let me just do something really quick. I want to save this for later. Here's what it would look like. We're just going to use this as a query. We're not going to use a table variable, but just so you could see what it would look like. And here we're in the completely wrong database. Let's go in the completely right database. We'll pick the customer types. And yeah, hey, how do you like those cap locks? That would still work. I'm just kind of fussy. There we go. Basically, here's what's going to get returned. Now, in the table variable, we're also going to have another field that looks like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But basically, the field we care about is CT key, CT display, CT, all this crap. And it comes out, this is actually the same order as if you were looking at the definition of the table, so it's perfect. But here's the thing, we can only return one chunk of data. So we have to kind of extract these things in order and kind of start appending them to really like the first one, kind of, sort of. How do we do that? Well, if you notice up here, there's a whole bunch of stuff, like field list is no doubt going to be what, the growing, almost like a temp field, it's going to get returned. Count and counter are going to be used in a loop. So it's really simple. We set the counter equal to 1, duh, and then we set the count equal to the count of how many records, or how many rows, not columns, how many rows are in our table variable. So it would be this. The counter would be set to 7. Excuse me, the count would be set to 7 because there's 7 things in here. Okay, so anywho, we come through here, and while we're doing this, we're going to increase our counter by 1 every time. That's what we do. We're incrementing it. As we do this, we're basically going to pass through this table 7 times. Now, this only has one field because of the quick query that I put together, but really, when this table variable gets created, it's actually going to have another field that is missing here, but it's just going to look like this. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And because there's a field called row num that's going to be in a table variable that has numbers that are incremented like that, we get to do something really magical. Instead of having to use this ugly thing in SQL Server called a cursor, which is a real pain in the neck sometimes, especially if you have an error, we're just using a simple, dumb while loop. While counter is less than or equal to count, like in any other loop in any other programming language, we're going to go from begin to end. Between this begin statement and end statement, we're going to run all this crap in the middle. So the first thing that we're going to do, notice too, we set field list equal to like not null but a blank string. You have to do that. Even though it's not supposed to have anything yet, it out of the box it's set to null. If it's set to null, you'll keep appending something to a null value, which means it just evaluates to null, and you'll be like really unhappy. So you always have to, like, if you're going to have something that you're going to be adding to in a loop, start it off at not null, but a blank string, an empty string. So the first thing we do is we set our field list, which the first iteration through, it's like crap, but it's not null, it's just nothing, equals field list plus, and then we're selecting the field from the table where the row num equals the counter, and this is the beauty of it. See, this would, as a table variable, this would have another field here called row num, like 1, 2, 3. So the first time where the counter is up to 1, we pick this guy. The next time through the loop, it would automatically pick this guy. You get it. So anyway, as we go through here and do all this fun stuff, it's going to keep building a string, but in between each value, it's going to stick a comma. Now, it will not stick a comma after the last value because that looks uncool, and if you're going to be cutting and pasting this or something, you can't really have that because it'll break. So we're only adding the comma if the counter is less than the count, meaning it's not the last record. So what does this look like? Well, let's get rid of all this. We don't need this anymore. Let's get rid of this. And now notice something. I want to show you the right way to do this and the wrong way to do this. Alright, whoops. Alright, let's do a select. Select, and then we're going to do DBO, get field list, that's our function, and then in parentheses, we're going to pass in the table that we want. And look at how beautiful this looks and bad at the same time. That's a real query result, and I mean, like, you can cut it and paste it, but it looks kind of horrible. Now, I can't do a print and a select at the same time because the select will trump it and we'll just get the same thing. But if I comment this out for a minute, here's why you're better off with print. You can really see what you're doing. It has a lot more pagination. See, now this looks like you just did it in Notepad or something. And this is especially true if you're going to have line feeds. You can't really see a line feed really when you're doing a select, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's say that you wanted to kind of upgrade this a little bit. Say that, you love this, but let's just say for the sake of argument that every time you get this, right, the first thing you do, because it's the way you code, is you have to go, well, I gotta take everything and put a carriage return, and I'm a lazy whatever, and because you might have a table with 50 fields in it. Who wants to do that? You want to go home. You don't want to do that. So all you would have to do is hit the delete key, because I already had this here. Ha ha ha. The char or char function, which is a built-in function, is basically saying if you pass in a number, it'll give you the ASCII equivalent. For a line feed, a carriage return is 13. A line feed is 10. What I'm going to show you here will work. But sometimes, depending on what you're doing, like when you take these things, and I'm going to show you, if you cut and paste it into Word or into a web app or something else, sometimes you have to put a char 10 and then a plus and then a char 13 after it, or it just won't work. It won't look any different with what we're going to do, but sometimes you have to add a 13 to a 10, not 23, but you basically do this. We're getting way off track here. There's just a little added bonus. If you're ever using this, and it's doing what you want in some places but not other places, add this to it. If that doesn't work, invert the 13 and 10. Just kind of play around with it, and you'll finally get where you need to go. But anyhow, let me go back here. Let me run this, by the way. Okay, so that's recompiled. So now watch this. When I do a print here, woohoo! Without having to lift a finger, it puts everything the way you want it. So if you're like me and you like to code stuff like this, which I believe is the proper way, it looks kind of wanted. This is overkill for one field, I mean, come on. But if you had 10 fields here, it's easier to read them this way, columnized, than going across this way and it goes off the screen and your monitor is unfortunately not, 27 feet wide. So anyway, one last thing. This will make you sick. If I do a select on this function and I want to get this, here's what's jacked about it. See? It doesn't put in the pagination because the way SQL Server works, it puts everything on one line, so it totally ignores your line feeds. That's why when you're trying to look at this stuff and, if you make a function that's going to return something formatted for you, use print. You'll be so much happier. Print, print, print. Okay, so basically, that's how you do this. This is a real-world example of why you would actually use a table variable in a function. You're probably wondering, well, why don't you just use a temp table? Same thing, right? Wrong. The problem is you can't use a temp table in SQL Server. SQL Server forbids it. It will not let you. It's like trying to argue with the board. You'll be assimilated. You won't get anywhere. Just, a new ship and new friends. Okay, so anyway, that's how you would do that. So a function, a real-world example of a table variable, and it actually does something useful. There you have it.